Viv, lovely to have you with us today.
Thank
Really,
you.
just such a pleasure. So, can you just tell us a little bit about, what brings you to this place where we're going to be talking about the Hagar and the Sarah dresses that you've created? I just want to find out a little bit more about you, really. So, what's your background?
Right. Well, I did a degree in theology, followed by an MA specifically in Old Testament. And but along the way, I always had the feeling that I really should have gone to art college, and really should have done the two in tandem had it been possible in some way. So I ended up mainly taking the theology route, and then there was a little flirtation with the idea of, would I be able to become a deaconess? I was attracted to that thought. I didn't quite have the self-confidence to call it a vocation. That sounded a bit too, I just kind of thought, maybe I could do that, in a sort of a sort of little way like that, really. And I did pursue it, but for various reasons to do with the times that we lived in, that didn't happen.
So what was that specifically?
So I went on.
Viv, what was that specifically? What was specifically the block on that for you?
Well, I got sort of part of the way, and then when it came to applying to actual colleges, because my husband was also going to be training, it was said that I wouldn't be able to train on the full-time scheme because I had a child. Therefore, we wouldn't be able to manage one child and two of us training. And then the part-time scheme was suggested, and at that time, the part-time scheme where we were living, that was denied to me also, on the grounds that they were mainly wanting to train men to be able to take the Eucharist, which I, of course, wouldn't be able to do as a deaconess. So they filled it up with men, and if there had any spaces left, then they'd take a woman. So in the end, I just went, never mind. And I got kind of a sudden rush of enthusiasm for, having more children and a big vicarage garden and all that kind of thing. And I enjoyed all of that. Yeah.
It's interesting, though, isn't it? Things have moved on hugely in the UK, so that now we've got over half the population of ordained ministers are actually female. An extraordinary shift from where we were in the 1970s.
Yeah.
Very, very different attitudes, different culture. But in other parts of the world, of course, these arguments can still be deployed against females coming through into the ministry, that it isn't quite their place to take the lead in being ministerial. Right, so anyway, Viv, you turned your attention to some other skills, which was your crafting skills. Could you talk to me a little bit about when did you first pick up a needle?
Well, I first started to sew when I was about 2.5, and my mum, helped me to make a little embroidery, and over the years, I always loved to make things, and so I would make lots of dollies' dresses and things like that. And I think I really did want to do art in later life, but honestly, there were some weird kind of slightly boyfriend problems, which led me to apply to university to do theology instead of doing the combined course that in art and theology that probably would have suited me better. So the craft and things got put on one side. And I, had children. Eventually, I got asked to do a little bit of teaching of Old Testament in the teacher training college as it was then, and also with ordinands. So it was very hard to sort of come back into biblical studies in that way after really a 20-year gap, and I found that very hard.
Did you start putting in some craft in at those moments then? Is that where they all started to come together?
Did. I had a bit of a light bulb moment because, I was teaching about the Proverbs, and I came across one proverb as I was facing the class, and it said, as golden apples on a silver ground, so is a word fitly spoken. And I think I went into a sort of a daydream, and I thought, that's a beautiful image. I want to go straight out of this classroom, go home and stitch this in some way. Anyway, I never did, funnily, actually stitch that particular thing, but I did use an idea to create an altar frontal with other people involved, and we all made a small little patch to do with the book of Proverbs. and then I sewed them all together, and it became the Proverbs altar frontal of the church that I was in at the time. And
it's actually a lovely thing to do, that, isn't it? I mean, I remember when the ordination of women was being argued to and fro across the church, and it was such a disruptive thing in some ways, because of course it was disruptive because it was a change in culture, but that there were quite a lot of sewing circles set up at that time to start stitching, you know, women from the Bible onto altar frontals or onto lovely hangings in the church, just to put it there in a way that wasn't heavily disputational, but just saying, this is where women are in our history, and speaking today, you know.
The funny thing about this church was that there was just one stained glass window which depicted what you call the kind of the superwoman of Proverbs 31, and so that was what made me think that a Proverbs altar frontal would be a really appropriate thing to have there.
Yeah, absolutely. She's basically a super mum, isn't she? You know, she's and businesswoman. She's that sort of idealized threat to all women.
Yes,
can you live up to this?
Well, that's like she'd be one of these that was on the kind of COVID videos now, telling us all the baking that she'd done and everything, wouldn't she? That's right. Yes.
And the business with
yes, that's right. She's running
followers.
A business from home. Yes.
So Viv, tell me now. Tell us about these lovely dresses you've got there, because you've already let me know that one of them belongs to Hagar and one of them belongs to Sarah. Talk me through those. Talk us through those, would you?
Yes. Let's see. Well, this one, and notice these lovely hangers that actually a friend made these for me, because these were originally entered in a competition, these dresses in Southwark Cathedral. We were given this, there was a competition where we could make some artwork on the stories of Abraham, Sarah and Hagar, and I kind of thought, what vehicle shall I use to express the things that I want to do? And I thought, it came to me, a dress for Sarah and a dress for Hagar. So I made these two dresses, and I was accompanied by a very dear friend of mine. I still talk to her just about more than once a week, and she made these lovely hangers.
Lovely.
And I would like to say thank you to Sheila, because she's been the most wonderful friend.
That's great. Friends are so important, Viv.
That's what's so lovely when you're making things, isn't it?
Yes.
It's something you do by yourself a lot, but it's lovely to have someone who understands, who you can say, what about this? What do you think about that? Have you any idea what I could do with this? And there was a crisis point in the Hagar one.
Lovely.
When I got all these pieces, and my friend sort of helped me through.
Lovely.
And I think crafting together is said to be wonderful, because we have a sort of a non-threatening gaze. We're looking down at the work we're doing, and people can speak, and they don't feel that someone's looking at them in a confrontational way. So that's one good thing about crafting.
I think that's really interesting and worth us considering, that actually it's like a meditative gaze that people are having on you, which is a really accepting and non-judgmental gaze, just appreciating what they're receiving, right?
That's right. Yes. It's and you know, it can be used to all sorts of purposes. You know, from the person within, helping your mental state, you know, to doing things, as you say, politically and in the church and things, to make some kind of a statement.
Yes,
so
yes.
it's coming into its own in these particular times, isn't it?
Well, I think it probably is. I think it will be very interesting to see what emerges out of our COVID times. And I mean, my daughters have been in touch and said, Mum, help, you know, with some sewing techniques, you know, what about that? How does that work? Having been too busy with their iPhones and new technology up until now, and suddenly look at, you know, these crafting skills, I think we'll have a re-emergence.
Well, that's right. Yes, that's right. Yes, I've been helping a couple of people with sewing during this time. It's strange, isn't it? You know, and I've always been willing to help people, but somehow it seemed to be...
They've been too busy.
That's right. Yes. So it's... Yes, so I made two dresses.
Why is Sarah's black and brown? Tell us me about that. Tell us about that.
Well,
she's less black and brown down in.
Yes, that's right. She's very sort of colourful. Now, of course, they went to live in Palestine, so I tried to sort of make some hints as to the sort of geographical place by putting a square yoke on this one, which is a bit redolent of Palestinian dress. And this one has a, I sort of thought about all the things in the Egyptian pyramids and things with the curved yoke like that.
Yes.
So I did a certain amount of research into sort of dress. I mean, they're not meant to be, if you like, anything too historical, just a suggestion of place, really.
Yes.
But the lines of the way that I've fitted the various little patches, I started off by making lots of little patches and sort of heaping them all up and then fitting them together. And Sarah's I did in a particularly sort of straight liney kind of a way, a little bit jerky, whereas because I felt that she was confined as a person in her tent, you know, with the I wish I could
the Genesis passage, so that she was in the tent when the angels came by and announced to Abraham that he would have a son in a year's time, and she laughs and goes, well, how can that happen when I'm past the age of menstruation? I've well past the years of childbearing.
Well, that's right, and she's in her tent, and Luther comments that Abraham keeps a very orderly household, and his wife is in the right place. You know,
an orderly household
in the tent
she's
there.
In
you
the
know,
right
she's
place.
You know, hey, we've got guests. You know, rustle up a meal, sort of thing.
Yes.
And so I felt that she. You know, she doesn't come across as always a very attractive character, but you know, you have to understand that she is constrained by being in this very patriarchal environment, as both the women are.
As Hagar is.
Yes, that's right.
Yes.
And
so talk about Hagar. Let's go to Hagar. Thank you for.
Yes. So of course she's constrained in a different way. She's been brought back from Egypt when they went down there because of famine. And she's completely at the beck and call of Sarah, and of course ultimately Abraham. And you know, she doesn't get the chance to say yes or no. You know, when Sarah says, look, I'm not having children, I think it would be a good idea if you have children with Hagar. There wasn't any opportunity to say, you know, be it unto me according to thy will or anything like that. She was just taken, and you're having a baby, and that's it. So
there was no consent, was there?
Pardon?
There was no consent.
No, that's right. No, she had to do as she was told. She actually, you know, says, I have seen God and lived. She is a very unusual female character in the Bible. And if I could just read this little bit from Phyllis Tribble.
Absolutely.
She says, a feminist scholar, she says she is there's the word first here.
Yes.
And Phyllis says she is the first person in the Bible to flee from oppression, the first person whom a messenger of God visits, the first woman to receive an annunciation, the first woman in the ancestor stories to bear a child, the first surrogate mother, the first slave to be freed, the first divorced wife, the first single parent, the first person to weep. Given all these distinctions, Hagar haunts the biblical narrative in ways that other characters do not.
Oh, well, we'll put that up on the page. Thank you. I've got that book, Phyllis Tribble's Texts of Terror.
Yes, that's right. It's absolutely brilliant.
It's a real breakthrough book. A real breakthrough book, I think, of the late 80s, wasn't it? It wasn't, you know, it's about 40 years old now. We should have probably a lecture on Phyllis's legacy, really, in the biblical studies field for breakthrough on women's stories, which have been so suppressed up until that point, so suppressed. So,
Right.
so thank you for talking us through Sarah and Hagar's dresses. What would you like, if you could dream big on Sarah and Hagar, where would you like this sort of crafting of a special dress for Hagar and for Sarah to go? Where might it go in terms of the liturgy of the church, in terms of the practice of the churches?
Well, yes, that's for sort of actually, do you mean actually using the textiles themselves?
Yes.
I think the thing is, I'd probably like to speak to small groups about them, because I think it helps maybe people to get interested in a biblical text that they might not have been, thought of reading before. So I think that's my first and foremost aim, is really to, in the hope that it would stimulate people into thinking, oh, that's interesting, I must go and have a look at that, because there's such fascinating stuff in the story about, where does their rift come from? Where does the rift between these two women come from?
Yes.
And
as you're stitching it, you can both see the disconnection, but you also see the connections. When we quieten down enough and craft something, you can see the things that connect them through this man, Abraham, and through a connection directly with God speaking to them.
That's right. Yes, I did want to emphasize how, we are all in one boat. We are one humanity. And in fact, I made these two little dolls, which are, this one is Ishmael and this one is Isaac. And I made them to look kind of similar but different, because that's how we all are, really. We actually have so much in common, more in common than what divides us. And so they've got two different little hairdos. He's got his Mohican, and Ishmael has got the 12 princes, so I've given him 12 little rings there, and he's got 12 stars for the 12 tribes.
Yes, and of course Isaac means laughter.
Yes, that's right. Yes, there's a lot about laughter in these stories, ever such a lot. Genesis 12 to 24, it's all in there, and there's lots about who laughs and why, and who
has the last laugh.
Yeah, well, that's right. Who does, really? I would say Hagar does very well, because I think she shows evidence of what I've heard described as post-traumatic growth. She goes off to have a new life, and she finds a wife for her son. So she makes good, really. And poor old Sarah, she disappears into her death, into this black bit here. It says Sarah, R.I.P. She disappears into her black cave,
and it's often, and actually, if you think about our liturgy, she's disappeared in our liturgy. If we go down remembering the patriarchs, the forefathers, we neglect this long line without whom nobody could have been born. The foremothers, who are as equally as part of our legacy as the patriarchs. And that's what I really love about your dresses, Viv. That they make powerfully visible these stories that otherwise get locked away. And so it's just been delightful talking to you today. Delightful.
Could I show you two really hopeful things?
Yes,
on here?
Yes.
I tried to represent the three Abrahamic faiths, so I put a third of a. I did a third of a circle there to represent Islam, and then on this one I've got a third of a circle with the Jewish star, and then with the Christian cross, to show that they all belong together
in the same stories.
And then that's right, that we're all, if you like, the descendants of Abraham in those faiths traditionally. And then also on both of them I put a little thing, and it says perhaps we could meet for coffee. Because while I was making them, I was listening to Woman's Hour. There's a lovely story about a woman who had racially abused a cashier in a bank, and anyway, the victim support had come in, and the woman who had done the abusing was re-educated, the victim was helped, and they came together, and it said, and the good outcome of the story was that they regularly had coffee together. And I thought, wouldn't it be lovely if, you know, we could have a world like that where we're all having coffee together.
Yes, coffee that's been produced justly.
Yes, that's right. Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
All
that good stuff, and then we can enjoy a coffee together. Well, that is absolutely the vision of One Boat, that through this, which is certainly a massive crisis, an unlooked for crisis globally, does give us the opportunity, though, to take a pause, take a step back, and think, what is our humanity about? Ultimately, what is it about? And I think, you know, you just talking us through, you know, what it means to be a craftswoman as well as a biblical scholar who, you know, would have progressed further on that line if context had been different. But, you know, you've raised your family, and you're now bringing us this post-traumatic growth out of your crafting. You know, it's been delightful, Viv. Thank you so much for sharing, and I look forward to people sending in designs for their Hagar and Sarah dresses, and in fact any other designs that they fancy cooking up during this COVID time. So thank you, Viv.
Oh, my pleasure.
It's been delightful. Thank you so much indeed.